From the earliest moments of our lives, we begin to observe the world around us. We watch people go to work, buy groceries, drive cars, raise children, and grow old. And if we're paying close enough attention, we begin to notice a curious thing. Most people, good, decent, hard-working people, do not end up where they hope to be. They had dreams once, they had plans, but somehow, somewhere along the way, they stopped pursuing them. They settled, and over time their lives became not the adventure they imagined, but a quiet resignation to routine. The numbers are staggering. In nearly every free society, no matter the era or the economy, only about 5% of people ever reach a level of genuine fulfillment, financially, emotionally, spiritually. The rest, 95%, fall short, not because they lack talent or intelligence or opportunity, but because they fall into a silent trap, drifting. You see, success is not a result of luck. It is not reserved for the chosen few. It is a deliberate outcome of right thinking, sustained effort, and unwavering direction. And yet 95% never truly choose. They react to life. They wait for things to change. They follow the crowd. And the crowd, as history proves again and again, is almost always headed in the wrong direction. The question we must ask is simple but profound. Why? Why do so many people in a world brimming with opportunity never make it? Why do they give up on their dreams or never pursue them at all? The answer lies not in circumstances, but in mindset. The average man or woman begins with high hopes, but the moment they encounter resistance, a failure, a criticism, a delay, they begin to question, and questioning leads to fear. Fear of embarrassment, fear of loss, fear of standing alone. And so they conform. They do what is safe, what is accepted, what is expected. But safety is a mirage, because what's accepted by the majority often leads to mediocrity. What's expected by the crowd is rarely exceptional, and what's comfortable is almost never transformational. Now let me tell you this. You were not born to follow the 95%. You were not designed to drift. You are a thinking, choosing, self-directed being, capable of altering the entire course of your life by the dominant thoughts you choose to accept. But that capacity is only activated when you decide to think for yourself. And thinking, true thinking, not reacting or remembering, is the rarest discipline of all. A man once said, "Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably why so few engage in it." He was right, because thinking requires effort. It demands solitude. It means stepping away from the noise, the chatter, the endless distractions of modern life, and confronting your own desires, your own fears, your own beliefs. It's easier to be told what to think. It's easier to scroll through life, chasing novelty, than to sit still and confront the weight of responsibility that comes with free will. But understand this, the difference between the 5% who thrive and the 95% who merely survive lies in the decision to think, to take control of the steering wheel of life instead of sitting in the passenger seat hoping someone else knows where they're going. Life is not a conveyor belt, it is a vehicle, and it will go wherever you direct it. But you must take the wheel. You must chart the course. You must decide that drifting is no longer acceptable. Most people don't fail because they aim too high and miss. They fail because they aim too low and hit. Or worse, they never aim at all. They wake up, they go to work, they come home, they eat, they sleep. And they repeat this for years, even decades, until one day they look up and ask, "Where did the time go?" The time went where you sent it. And if you sent it nowhere, that's exactly where it arrived. Success is not a secret, it is a system. It begins with desire, it is sustained by discipline, and it is fulfilled through contribution. But before any of that, it begins with thought. Clear, directed, intentional thought. You become what you think about. That is the oldest and truest law of personal achievement, and it explains with painful clarity why so many never make it. They never thought about where they were going. They let the world do their thinking for them, and the world is rarely thinking about you. Now, if you're listening to this, I ask you to pause for a moment, not to scroll, not to click away, but to lean in, because this may be the most important turning point of your life. Ask yourself this question: am I thinking or am I following? Am I deciding or am I drifting? Am I truly becoming who I could be, or am I repeating the same thoughts, the same routines, the same justifications that have kept me stuck? Because your future is not written in stone. It is shaped in silence. It is forged in the furnace of mental discipline, clarity, and action. And the beautiful truth is this: it does not take a miracle. It does not require perfect conditions. It simply requires decision. Decide to no longer think like the 95%. Decide to no longer blame, delay, or justify. Decide to begin, today, right now. Take out a notepad, write down what you truly want, not what's realistic, not what's practical. What you want. That is the beginning. That is how the 5% are born. They start the same as everyone else, but at some point, maybe while listening to something like this, they make a new agreement with themselves. They decide that excuses are lies, that comfort is the enemy, that potential must be honored, and then they act on that decision, day after day, even when it's difficult, even when no one is watching, even when the results are not immediate, because they know that results always follow thought and action, never the other way around. They plant the seed and tend the soil long before the harvest arrives. And when it does, others call them lucky. But luck had nothing to do with it. It was decision. It was clarity. It was consistent effort over time. 95% wait for permission. 5% give themselves permission. 95% need validation. 5% validate themselves with disciplined action. 95% are pulled by circumstance. 5% are pulled by purpose. The question is, which are you becoming? If this message resonates with you, then don't let it fade. Don't treat this like another moment of inspiration that's quickly forgotten. Let it sink in. Let it rewire something in you. Because the truth, as harsh as it may seem, is liberating. Most people will never make it. But you can. You can. And that begins by refusing to think like most people. It begins by taking full responsibility for the direction of your life. Not someday, not next year, today. Begin where you are, with what you have, and take the next right step. That is all it takes to separate yourself from the crowd. One decision, followed by one action, repeated, until your results become undeniable. That is how the 5% are built. Not overnight, not all at once, but by choosing again and again not to drift, but to direct, not to follow, but to lead, not to wait, but to act. The choice always is yours. And if you've listened this far, you're already beginning to think like the few. Now act like it. The world we live in today is noisy, visibly, audibly, mentally. Most people are drowning in information and starving for wisdom. They scroll, they swipe, they consume. But rarely do they stop and reflect. The 95% live in reaction. A notification dictates their mood. A comment disrupts their confidence. A trend redirects their goals. They become victims of digital momentum carried by waves they never chose to ride. And in that endless noise, they lose contact with their own voice. But the few, the 5%, protect that voice. They cultivate silence, not just the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. They create space to think, to feel, to discern, because they understand this universal truth. Your life cannot outrun your clarity. And clarity only emerges when you pause long enough to hear what your soul is saying. The 95% are always in a rush, but the 5%, they move with intention, with awareness, with peace, and because of that, their progress is not frantic, it is focused. Stillness is not weakness, it is power under control. It is the space where wisdom is born. It is where you access your deepest intuition, your highest thoughts, your clearest vision. In the stillness, you remember what matters. You remember who you are. And you remember that none of this race, this chase, this pressure, is as important as becoming the person you were created to be. The 5% prioritize this. They rise early or retreat late. They find solitude. They write. They think. They pray. They design their inner world before they step into the outer one. They don't let the day dictate their direction. They dictate the day. That is the difference. The 95% are shaped by circumstance. The 5% shape their circumstances from the inside out, and that shaping begins in silence, in stillness, in self-examination. You cannot lead others if you are not leading yourself, and you cannot lead yourself if your mind is filled with chaos and noise. Let me ask you something few ever consider. When was the last time you spent a full hour alone, without input, just thinking, not worrying, not planning, thinking about who you are, about what you want, about what is pulling you off course, about what must change? That hour could change your life more than any book, seminar, or podcast. Because in that hour, you face truth, not filtered, not curated, raw truth. And truth is the beginning of all transformation. But most avoid it. They distract themselves from the pain of confrontation. They keep busy. But being busy is not the same as being productive. And busyness, when unexamined, becomes a clever form of procrastination. The 5% are not afraid of facing the hard questions. They run toward them. They ask, where am I lying to myself? Where have I grown lazy? What excuses am I rehearsing? What would the best version of me do today? These questions cut through the fog, and in the light of that clarity, new power is born. Power does not begin with strength. It begins with honesty. Strength comes after. Strength is the reward of alignment. The 95% try to appear strong. They wear confidence like a costume. But inside they are scattered, uncertain, disconnected. The 5% don't chase the appearance. They seek the substance. And that substance is formed in the quiet moments of inner truth. It's when you look yourself in the eye and say, no more. No more compromise. No more pretending. No more small living. That is where greatness begins. Not in front of crowds, but in the mirror. Most people will never have that conversation. They'll wait for a wake-up call, a diagnosis, a breakdown, a betrayal. But you don't have to wait. You can choose awakening over breakdown. You can choose clarity over confusion. You can choose transformation by choice instead of by crisis. That is the path of the 5%, and it begins now, with your permission, with your decision. Now let's talk about alignment, one of the most overlooked forces of power. Alignment is when your thoughts, actions, and beliefs are all moving in the same direction. Most people are not aligned. They say one thing, believe another, and do something else entirely. And that fragmentation creates internal tension. It weakens confidence, it drains energy. But when you are aligned, you become unstoppable. Your energy compounds, your confidence rises, your focus sharpens, you feel congruent, and people can sense that. You walk differently, speak differently, lead differently. Because you are no longer pretending, you are embodying. That is what the 5% pursue relentlessly. Not just external results, but internal integrity. They want to live lives where who they are in public matches who they are in private, where their actions reflect their values, where their goals reflect their vision, where their discipline reflects their devotion. And that alignment, though invisible to the world, becomes the foundation of their success. The 95% think alignment is a luxury, something you get to once life slows down. But the truth is, alignment is the prerequisite for peace. You will never feel grounded until your life is aligned, until your words match your walk, until your calendar reflects your priorities, until your habits reflect your beliefs. That's why so many people feel anxious, restless, dissatisfied, not because they're broken, but because they're out of sync with their own truth. But you can realign. You can pause, recalibrate, and make new agreements with yourself. It starts with asking, what am I tolerating? Where am I betraying myself? What would it look like to live in full alignment? Don't just think about it, write it down, sit with it, begin the shift. Not all at once, but one decision at a time. That's how alignment is rebuilt. Slowly, intentionally, with courage, and each new act of alignment unlocks more power, more peace, and more momentum. The 5% are not superhuman. They are simply consistent. They build daily rituals that reinforce alignment. They protect their mornings. They direct their thoughts. They track their progress. They celebrate their growth. They treat themselves like someone worth leading. And over time, that discipline creates a compound effect. While the 95% are waiting for motivation, the 5% are building momentum. They understand that emotion follows motion. That discipline creates desire. That clarity follows action. And so they move, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because they've trained themselves to live by commitment, not convenience. That training doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with a choice, a single decision to stop living in fragments and start living in full power. That choice is available to you right now. And if you make it, your life will begin to change, first internally, then externally, and eventually unrecognizably. There's a hidden pattern behind every extraordinary life, and it begins with one word: standards. The 95% live according to minimums. What's the least I need to do? How can I get by? What's acceptable? But the 5% live by maximums. What's possible? How far can I go? What would excellence demand? Your standards are not what you say you want. Your standards are what you settle for. If you want to know what your true standards are, look at your daily behavior. Look at your habits. Look at your environment. Are you living in alignment with your highest potential, or are you tolerating what's convenient? The truth is, most people adjust their dreams down to match their behavior. But the 5% adjust their behavior up to match their dreams. That's the difference. That's the dividing line. It's not ambition. Everyone has ambition. It's standard. What do you tolerate? What do you allow in your life, your mind, your relationships, your routines? Because whatever you allow, you endorse. Raising your standards is not about becoming harsh. It's about becoming honest. It's about looking at your life with clear eyes and asking, what in my world does not reflect my values? What in my schedule betrays my vision? What in my circle drains my energy, mocks my goals, or feeds my doubt? And then acting. Not later, not next week. Now, the 5% do not delay alignment. They correct course quickly. They don't rationalize toxic patterns. They don't justify mediocrity. They look it in the face and say, this no longer belongs in my life. That clarity is power. That boldness is rare. But it is available to anyone willing to honor their standard more than their excuses. And when you do that consistently, your life begins to shift. People notice. Energy changes. New doors open. Not because the world became easier, but because you became clearer. And clarity is magnetic. It pulls opportunity. It repels distraction. It creates momentum, where once there was only stagnation. Consider this. The world does not give you what you want. It gives you what you are willing to accept. And most people accept far less than they are capable of. They accept unhealthy relationships. They accept average health. They accept jobs they hate, beliefs that limit, routines that numb, and environments that steal their ambition. Why? Because raising your standard requires discomfort. It requires letting go. It requires confrontation. But here's the deeper truth. Staying where you are is not comfortable either. There is a quiet agony in tolerating a life beneath your potential. It wears on your self-respect. It leaks into your relationships. It poisons your peace. And one day you wake up and realize that avoiding the discomfort of growth has cost you far more than facing it ever would have. The 5% know this. That's why they stretch. That's why they disrupt comfort. That's why they elevate their standard, again and again. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Let's shift to something most people never connect with greatness: language. The way you speak internally and externally shapes the architecture of your mind. The 95% speak in limitation. They say things like, I'm not good at that, that's just how I am, I'll try, or someday. But the 5% speak in intention. They say, I'm becoming, I'm learning, this is who I am now, and today is the day. Words are not decorations. Words are declarations. Every time you speak, you are either programming your mind for power or for passivity. And the most dangerous form of language is not what you say to others. It's what you say to yourself. The internal dialogue you repeat becomes the foundation of your identity. And identity is the thermostat of your life. You can only rise to the level of what you believe you deserve. Change your self-talk and you begin to change your standard. Change your standard and you begin to change your future. The 5% have a discipline around their language. They don't speak carelessly. They don't joke about failure. They don't echo the pessimism of the crowd. They speak life. They speak growth. They speak with authority, because they know that what follows I am becomes a command to the subconscious. I am strong. I am clear. I am disciplined. These are not affirmations for the mirror. They are instructions to the brain, and the brain obeys. Over time, those words become emotions. Those emotions become habits, and those habits become results. The 95% call it delusion. The 5% call it design, and the results speak for themselves. So the next time you speak about yourself, your future, your goals, listen carefully, because your words are not just commentary. They are creative. You are casting a vote for the person you will become. Make that vote count. Now let's talk about time, the great equalizer. Every human on this planet gets 24 hours a day, but the way those hours are used determines everything. The 95% treat time casually. They kill time, waste time, fill time. But the 5% treat time like currency. They invest it, track it, guard it, and they don't trade it cheaply, because they understand that time is life. How you spend your hours is how you spend your existence. And most importantly, once it's gone, it's gone. There are no refunds, no extensions, no second drafts. The 5% build their schedule around their priorities, not their emotions. They don't wait until they feel like it. They act according to design, not impulse. And that design compounds. A single hour of focused effort each day over a year becomes 365 hours of mastery. That's 9 full work weeks. While most drift, they build. While most delay, they accelerate. While most run in circles, they move in a straight line toward their vision. The question is not, do you have enough time? The question is, what are you doing with the time you already have? Everyone says they're busy, but busy is not the same as productive. Busy is reactive. Productive is intentional. The 95% live in reaction. They start the day checking notifications, responding to other people's agendas, and drifting into distractions. The 5% begin the day with intention. They own their morning. They set their focus. They ask what matters most today, and they act on it before the noise begins. That one habit alone separates the few from the many, because how you start determines how you continue. Begin with reaction, and you chase all day. Begin with intention, and you lead all day. You don't need more hours. You need more clarity, more discipline, more focus, and those are all within your control. That's the empowering truth. You already have what you need. You just need to use it differently. There is one final separator that silently divides the 95% from the 5, and it's this: responsibility. Not the kind handed out by title or role, but the kind you take for yourself. Total, radical responsibility. The 95% blame. They blame the economy. They blame their childhood. They blame their boss, their ex, their genetics, the timing. But the 5%, they own everything. Every decision, every delay, every reaction, every result, not because it's easy, but because it's powerful. When you blame, you give your power away. When you own it, you take your power back. The 5% understand that everything in their external life is a mirror of something they once accepted, believed, or tolerated internally. They don't say, "Why me?" They say, "What now?" And with that shift in mindset, they move, they grow, they change, because they understand that responsibility is not about guilt, it's about control. And only the responsible ever gain true control over their life's direction. Think about it. When something goes wrong, the average person looks for who to blame, but the uncommon person looks for how to grow. That one difference changes the entire trajectory of your life. Blame keeps you stuck. Ownership sets you free. And freedom is not found in doing whatever you want. It's found in becoming who you were designed to be. That becoming requires discipline. That discipline is fueled by clarity. And clarity begins with responsibility. It's all connected. The 95% see obstacles and say, "This is why I can't." The 5% see the same obstacle and ask, "How do I overcome this?" Same circumstance, different response. And that response becomes identity. Over time, the person who asks how begins to find how. The person who asks why not begins to find why not. It is not intelligence that separates success from stagnation. It is response. Your response is the beginning of your reinvention. And reinvention is always available. The moment you stop waiting and start owning. Let me tell you something most will never hear. No one is coming to rescue you. Not the government. Not your mentor. Not your spouse. Not your boss. You are not owed anything. And that's not bad news, it's the best news. Because it means you don't have to wait anymore. You can begin where you are, with what you have. You don't need a perfect plan, you need a personal decision. The 5% understand that the world is not fair. But they don't spend time protesting reality. They build within it. They ask, "Given what is, what can I do?" And then they do it. The 95% wait for fair conditions, for the right time, for permission. But that wait turns into weeks, then years, then decades, until their potential becomes a memory of what could have been. But the 5%, they don't wait. They act. They try. They fall. They rise. They adjust. They move again. That momentum, however imperfect, becomes their advantage, because motion beats perfection, every time. Now I want you to consider something deeply. Who must you become in order to live the life you desire? Not what must you do. Who must you become? Because actions without identity are temporary. But when your identity changes, everything changes. The 95% focus on tactics, but the 5% focus on transformation. They ask, what kind of person has the results I want? And they begin living like that person now. Not someday, now. They align their habits, language, posture, priorities, associations, and attitude to that future self. And over time they become it. Not through magic, but through congruence. They don't just talk success, they walk it, they think it, they embody it, until the outer world reflects the inner shift. That's the power of identity-based action. It's not about acting like someone you're not, it's about acting like the person you're becoming. That alignment is what accelerates the gap between potential and reality. And it begins with a decision to let go of who you were. Most people carry outdated identities like old luggage, beliefs they adopted in childhood, stories they accepted in failure, labels they absorbed from others, and they wonder why change feels impossible. It's because they're still thinking from the mind of someone who gave up. But you don't have to keep carrying that version of you. You can update your identity the way you update your software. Question your programming. Replace old beliefs with new truths. Instead of "I always quit," say "I'm becoming someone who follows through." Instead of "I'm bad with money," say "I'm learning to master money." Instead of "I'm just not disciplined," say "I am training myself in discipline daily." Identity is flexible, but only if you choose to flex it. The 5% reinvent themselves constantly. They don't cling to the past. They release it. They outgrow their limitations the way a snake sheds its skin, because they know the only way to reach the next level is to become someone new, someone aligned, someone ready. And as you become that person, something shifts. Life begins to respond differently. People treat you with more respect, not because they changed, but because you did. You walk with more certainty. You speak with more conviction. You hold boundaries. You protect your time. You say no without guilt and yes without hesitation. Not because you're better than others, but because you've remembered who you are. And who you are is not a victim, not a statistic, not a product of your past. You are a creator, a thinker, a decision-maker, a force of contribution. But you must live that truth daily. You must embody it when no one is watching. That's the test. That's the separation. It's not what you post, it's what you practice. The 5% don't announce their growth, they live it. And in living it, they attract more opportunity, more freedom, more impact. Not because they chased those things, but because they became the kind of person those things chase. Now I'll ask you to do something most never will. Don't just be inspired, be initiated. Let this be the moment you cross the line. The moment you say, "I am done living like the 95%. Not with bitterness, not with arrogance, but with clarity, with resolve, with reverence for the life you've been given. Because that life is finite, and every hour wasted in fear, in delay, in smallness, is an hour stolen from your future self. Reclaim those hours. Reclaim your mind. Reclaim your standard. Not by changing everything overnight, but by changing one thing now. Write it down. Speak it aloud. Begin today. Not to impress others, but to express what you've always known deep down. You were made for more. That more is not greed. It's calling. It's excellence. It's growth. And the only way to honor it is to walk it, boldly, consistently, quietly, until it speaks for itself. If you've made it this far, then you are no longer an observer. You are no longer simply listening. You are engaged in a process, an uncommon process of renewal. And I say uncommon with intention, because very few people ever make it here. The 95% will have already checked out. They would have dismissed the message as too intense, too demanding, too disciplined for their liking. But you stayed, you listened. And that matters because how you do anything is how you do everything. Finishing what you start, especially when no one is watching, is a mark of distinction. And that's the mindset of the 5%. Finish the page, finish the day, finish the mission. No loose ends, no scattered efforts, no flinching in the face of follow-through. That single trait, consistency, unlocks more progress than talent, opportunity, or timing ever will. Because in a world full of starters, finishers are rare. And the rare are always rewarded. Let's talk now about contribution. Because all the clarity, discipline, identity, and momentum in the world mean very little if they are not directed outward. The 95% think about what they can get. The 5% focus on what they can give. They understand that true success is never self-contained. It radiates, it uplifts, it multiplies. Your value in this world is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. Your income is a reflection of your usefulness. Your influence is a reflection of your service. Your fulfillment is a reflection of your alignment with purpose. And your purpose will always have something to do with serving others. The 5% do not pursue greatness in isolation. They build, they lead, they teach, they serve. Not because they have to, but because they've realized that the highest version of life is never about consumption. It's about contribution. It's not about being the best in the world. It's about being the best for the world. You were born with a unique set of talents, strengths, and perspectives. Those were not accidents. They were clues. Clues to the role you are meant to play in the larger story of life. But if you ignore those clues, if you bury your gifts beneath fear or laziness or conformity, the world will miss something it desperately needs. That's not ego. That's responsibility. If you've been given the ability to speak, then speak life. If you've been given the ability to solve, then solve problems. If you've been given the ability to lead, then lead with courage and clarity. The 5% understand that their gifts are not ornaments, they are assignments, and they act accordingly. While the 95% wait to be called upon, the 5% get to work. They build something that helps others rise, and in doing so, they rise as well. That is the paradox of contribution. In giving, you gain. In serving, you grow. In pouring out, you are filled. Now let's revisit the foundational truth. We become what we think about. It is the root system beneath everything we've discussed. Every habit, every result, every relationship, every achievement. Trace it back far enough and you'll find a thought, a belief, a dominant idea you either accepted or rejected. The 95% live with unexamined thoughts. They absorb opinions like sponges, never stopping to ask, do I believe this, or is this true? But the 5% filter their thoughts. They examine their assumptions. They reprogram their minds daily, because they understand that every input is either shaping them or eroding them. And they take that seriously. They feed their minds with strength, with wisdom, with vision, and they starve the mind of fear, of distraction, of victimhood. That's not positivity, it's strategy, it's training. You don't build a powerful mind by accident. You build it the same way you build anything of worth, by design, by effort, and by repetition. Your life is the fruit, your thoughts are the seed, and the ground is always fertile. What you plant today, you will reap later. That law is unbreakable, which means today matters. Not because it's dramatic or filled with fireworks, but because it's another chance to plant better seeds. Seeds of discipline, seeds of vision, seeds of service, seeds of courage. Most people don't understand this. They think success is made of huge moments. But the 5% know the truth. Success is a collection of small, repeated acts of intention. Done daily, done quietly, done with love. You don't need a breakthrough to change your life. You need a pattern. And patterns begin with a decision. A decision you can make today. You can choose to stop planting weeds. You can choose to stop drifting. You can choose to become the kind of person who leaves nothing to chance, who takes nothing for granted, who rises not once but again and again until excellence becomes second nature. In closing, let me remind you of something important. There is no one coming to hand you this life. There is no ceremony, no diploma, no applause line waiting to anoint you. That moment where everything shifts, it's not in the future. It's here. It's now. It's internal. When you say, this is who I choose to be, and then live in agreement with that declaration, that is where power lives, not in external rewards, but in internal resolve. When you own your mind, you own your future. When you govern your focus, you govern your outcomes. When you live in alignment with truth, you attract what others chase. And in that space you find peace. Not because everything is easy, but because you've become immovable, anchored, clear, alive. That is the rare air of the 5%, and it is available to you, not someday, but today. Now, if this message has stirred something in you, then don't let it end here. Take a moment to share it with someone you care about. Leave a comment below that marks your decision. Not just to remember, but to begin. Because when we declare, we commit. And when we commit, we move. And when we move, we rise. The great tragedy is not that people fail. The great tragedy is that most never truly try. They spend their entire lives preparing to begin, waiting for the right time, the perfect plan, the absence of fear. But that time never comes. Because fear does not vanish, it is conquered through motion. Clarity does not descend from the clouds, it is carved out by decision. Most people die still carrying the treasure they were meant to give the world. Their ideas, their businesses, their art, their leadership, it dies with them. Not because the world didn't need it, but because they never brought it forth. And why? Because they lived by the psychology of the 95%. The psychology that says, be realistic, play it safe, don't rock the boat. That is the language of quiet failure. Understand this, the greatest danger you will ever face is not defeat, it is delay. Because delay becomes habit, and that habit becomes a life. Now let me challenge you to confront something most never do, the cost of inaction. We often calculate the risks of doing something, the chance of failure, the embarrassment, the discomfort, but we rarely calculate the cost of doing nothing. What does it cost you to stay where you are? What does it cost you to keep postponing your calling? What does it cost you to never speak your truth, never stretch your potential, never test your strength? The cost is staggering. It is a life lived in the shadows of what could have been, and those shadows grow darker with each passing year. You don't get time back, you don't get youth back, you don't get moments back, and the truth is you already know this. You can feel it in your gut when you lie awake at night, that sense that something inside you wants more meaning, more challenge, more impact. That is your potential knocking. But it will not wait forever. You must answer. If you were to walk through a cemetery, you would find names, dates, and epitaphs, but what you wouldn't see are the businesses never started, the books never written, the ideas never born, the leadership never expressed. That is where the real tragedy lies, not in death itself, but in lives unlived. The greatest waste in the world is human potential left untouched. The richest soil on earth is not in oil fields or diamond mines, it is in graveyards, because that's where so many took their dreams with them. Why? Because they waited, they hesitated, they followed the 95%, they believed the lie that someday would come. Someday does not exist. All we ever have is today. And the few who make it, the 5%, they understand this with every fiber of their being. They treat today as sacred. They do not waste it. They do not casually pass it. They seize it. They use it. And they build their lives one decision at a time, stacked with intent and clarity. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful forces that keep people locked in mediocrity: environment. You cannot rise while surrounded by anchors. The 95% live by the code of comfort, conformity, and consensus. They mock ambition. They avoid discomfort. They protect the status quo. And if you spend your time among them, you will slowly begin to think like them, act like them, and become them. Not because you meant to, but because environment is stronger than willpower. If you want to change your life, you must first change your surroundings. This doesn't always mean leaving people behind, but it always means protecting your mind. Guard it like a fortress. What you watch, what you read, who you listen to, who you associate with, these are the architects of your future. You cannot soar like an eagle if you're walking with turkeys. You cannot think like a champion if you're drowning in gossip, complaints, and passive cynicism. Your mind becomes what it's fed. Choose your diet wisely. Consider this truth. The 95% talk about people. The 5% talk about ideas. The 95% seek entertainment. The 5% seek education. The 95% live by emotion. The 5% live by principle. If you want to join the few, you must begin thinking like the few. This is not elitism, it is responsibility. It is maturity. It is understanding that your life becomes the result of your dominant patterns of thought, of action, of association. The moment you raise your standard, everything changes. Not because the world changes, but because you no longer tolerate the old version of yourself. That's the line of separation. That's the day your life begins, when you stop negotiating with mediocrity, when you stop apologizing for ambition, when you stop making excuses for why you're not where you could be. Raise your standard. Raise your expectation, and you'll find yourself moving in a new direction. The 5% do not avoid hard things, they seek them, because they understand something the rest do not. Comfort is a slow death. Ease is the enemy of excellence. What feels good today often costs you tomorrow, and what costs you today is often what creates your greatness tomorrow. This is the paradox of discipline. It is uncomfortable in the short term, but liberating in the long term. The 95% seek the opposite. They want ease now and they pay for it later. But there is no escaping the cost. You either pay the price of discipline now or the price of regret later. And regret is far more expensive. Regret is a bill that never stops collecting interest. So choose your pain wisely. Choose the discomfort of growth, the burn of effort, the strain of becoming, because every ounce of that discomfort is shaping the version of you that lives on the other side of fear. When you walk through the world with vision, people will not understand you. They'll question your intensity. They'll call you obsessed, unrealistic, arrogant. But understand this, mediocrity always resents greatness, because greatness reminds them of what they could be. Do not let their confusion dim your fire. Let it sharpen your focus. You are not here to be understood. You are here to understand yourself, to understand your purpose, to understand the laws that govern success, fulfillment, and freedom, and to live in alignment with them, regardless of how many follow. The path of the few is not popular, it is not crowded, but it is worth it, because at the end of your life, you will not wish you had conformed. You will wish you had been bold, that you had tried, that you had dared, that you had acted on the whisper inside you instead of the noise around you. And the only way to guarantee that outcome is to start now. Start where you are, not when it's easy, not when it's convenient, not when others agree. Start with what you have. Start with who you are. But start because nothing changes until you begin. And the more you delay, the more you convince your subconscious that it's okay to settle. Don't let your mind become comfortable in mediocrity. Don't let your body become addicted to inaction. Don't let your spirit grow numb from lack of pursuit. You were made to move, to strive, to evolve. And that evolution begins with one choice: to stop waiting and start creating. Write it down. Speak it aloud. Step into it. No one is coming to rescue you. No one is coming to give you permission. That's the good news, because it means the power has always been in your hands. And when you realize that, you are no longer part of the 95%. You have stepped into the ranks of the few, the doers, the seekers, the builders. Stay there. There is a principle that governs all achievement, and it is as simple as it is ignored. Clarity precedes power. Without clarity, we wander. Without clarity, we chase illusions. Without clarity, even our greatest effort is misdirected. Think of a ship at sea. If the captain does not know the destination, it does not matter how advanced the ship is or how favorable the weather. It will drift until it crashes or is lost. And that is precisely how most people live. They wake up without direction, go to work without purpose, and return home without fulfillment. Not because they are incapable, but because they never took the time to define what they truly want. They confuse movement with progress. They mistake activity for achievement. But unless that activity is aligned with a defined aim, it becomes wasted motion. The 5% do not begin their day by checking the news or scanning social media. They begin with vision. They begin with intention. They know where they are going, and because they know, they make progress even if that progress is slow, even if it's unseen by others. You must get serious about defining your goal, not a vague wish, not a polite answer when someone asks what you want to do with your life. A goal that is written down, visualized daily, and pursued with discipline. Earl Nightingale once said, "Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal." That means success is not something you arrive at, it's something you live, moment by moment, as you move intentionally toward the life you have chosen. And that's the key, chosen. Most people never choose. They drift into careers, fall into habits, adopt the beliefs of their parents, their peers, their environment. They never sit down in silence and ask, what do I want? What matters to me? What am I willing to pay the price for? And without that clarity, life becomes reactive instead of proactive. The world becomes a series of distractions. And in a distracted state, we forget we have a choice. But the 5%, they remember. They choose. And then they build their lives around that choice with relentless focus. You see, the mind is like a camera. Whatever you focus on, you bring into detail. Everything else blurs. And that's how reality works. If you focus on fear, on problems, on doubt, that's what sharpens. That's what you begin to see, think about, and act on. But if you focus on vision, on goals, on potential, that becomes your dominant lens. And through that lens, the world becomes a field of opportunity. The facts may be the same, but the focus is different. And that difference changes everything. Most people walk through life with a fogged lens. They have not cleaned it. They have not adjusted the focus. They react to what's loudest instead of what's truest. But the few, they rise in the morning and decide what to focus on. They write it down, they say it aloud, they visualize it with emotion, because they know the mind responds to intensity and repetition. They take control of the inner narrative, and over time that narrative becomes their reality. Let me be clear. This is not magic. It is not mystery. It is mechanism. Your mind, your body, your habits, your results, they follow the direction of your dominant thoughts. And those thoughts are shaped by what you dwell on. If you do not feed your mind daily with your vision, it will be fed by the world's agenda. And the world's agenda is rarely in your best interest. It is engineered for profit, distraction, and control. That's why the 95% get pulled in every direction. That's why they spend hours consumed by entertainment, controversy, and noise. And that's why they never gain momentum, because they never anchor into purpose. The few, on the other hand, are anchored. They do not chase every trend. They do not drown in information. They filter ruthlessly. They protect their attention. They program their environment to reflect their goals. And because of that, they make steady, focused progress even when the world is in chaos. You must begin thinking in terms of cause and effect, not chance and fate. The 95% hope things will improve. They wait for better circumstances. They pray for luck. But success is not the result of chance. It is the result of cause. Specific causes produce specific effects. Plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree. Not a mango, not a mystery. But most people plant nothing and expect a harvest. Or they plant weeds and wonder why their life is full of problems. If you want better results, you must plant better thoughts, better actions, better habits. You must become the cause. And when you do, the effects will follow. This is not optimism. This is law. The law of cause and effect does not discriminate. It rewards the diligent. It punishes the passive. It honors consistency. And it ignores emotion. Whether you feel like it or not is irrelevant. What you plant is what you grow. Choose your seeds wisely. Let me ask you now, what are you planting? What are you feeding your mind with each day? What are you rehearsing in your thoughts, repeating in your words, reinforcing through your actions? Because repetition creates belief, and belief drives behavior, and behavior produces results. This is the chain of transformation. And it begins with you. The 95% think the world is happening to them. The 5% know they are shaping the world through their own thoughts, habits, and decisions. This shift in mindset is the difference between living at effect and living at cause. One leads to blame, the other leads to power, and until you make this shift, no amount of motivation will last. You must believe, not with blind hope, but with grounded certainty that your thoughts matter, that your focus matters, that your choices matter, because they do. They are the tools with which you are building or destroying your future. Use them with care. Here's something few people are ever told. The greatest force shaping your destiny is not your circumstances, your background, or even your education. It is your daily focus. What you give your attention to consistently becomes the architecture of your life. And that attention is always a choice. It may not feel like it, especially in a world designed to hijack your focus. But it is. You choose what to ignore. You choose what to pursue. And those small choices repeated over time become your character, your results, your destiny. Most people underestimate the power of small decisions. But a small rudder turns a massive ship. A slight adjustment in focus, repeated daily, can change the entire trajectory of your life. This is how the few rise, not through dramatic acts, but through consistent alignment. They choose their thoughts like a craftsman chooses tools, with precision, with purpose, with vision. And through that discipline, they build what others only dream about.